The following transmission is a conversation with Kate Aces, founder of the Independent Fallout Wiki. As a former moderator for the Nukapedia Fallout page, Kate will leave the website following its acquisition by Fandom, the host service for just about every wiki page on the internet. After leaving, she would go on to create this new page, one free of corporate oversight and free to expand its coverage of not just the core games and series media, but community projects, creators, mods, and everything in between. And yes, I do have my own page on the wiki. I am follower Toshi, and this is the Atomcast. If you enjoy this episode, be sure to follow for future uploads, and subscribe to our Patreon, where your monthly contribution will go towards improving the quality of transmission, ensuring that we remain ad-free, as well as helping to decrease the time between uploads. As always, links to our Patreon, as well as guest socials, can be found in the description. And be sure to leave a comment recommending creators that you would like to see as future guests. Without further ado, Kate Aces and the Independent Fallout Wiki.
So at what point did you sort of realize that you were more so, like, not just like a fan of Fallout, but like obsessed with Fallout? Because I feel like you kind of have to be to, like, not just like, because, you know, there's like cataloging Fallout, you know, different content creators do it, lore creators do it all the time, in like cataloging different events and historical moments in Fallout. But then there's that next level stuff where you're making, like, you're putting pen to paper and making web pages on like agriculture, LGBTQ representation, and like all these other things. I think you have one that's like specifically of like the different vehicles in the scene in the franchise, like all this extra level stuff where you kind of have to be like obsessed with the franchise to even like know about.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I also think it was kind of like a slow burn. Like, it starts off little and then you kind of go through and say like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we had a page about this? Like, well, why don't we have a page about this? Let's write about this. And then you read something else and you're like, wow, what about this? And then all of a sudden you realize you're like super thick in the weeds, but it's fun to do. Because it's kind of like you spot stuff and you're like, wow, we could add that to this page. And then we can go down this rabbit hole and then add it to this page. And it just keeps on going.
So like, what's like the most obscure bit of information that you think you have just like, you know, like unearthed in a sense?
Right now we're going through like all of the different words that the habologists use across the series. That's like the like they got their own like glossary of like weird stuff they talk about, and everybody's really hype about like categorizing like all those things and what they mean, and it's very unique to the series and kind of like a play on the whole Scientology bit. So we've been having a ball kind of like looking through all their dialogue in Fallout 2 and 4, and it's also cool to see like across the series, like, oh, they talk about it here, and then you know, however many years later they bring it back and add it to the Nuka World DLC from Fallout 2, and you know, kind of see that through line. That's what we've been doing right now
with the habologists. Yeah, is there any sort of like, especially since them specifically are a very strange group, because, you know, we see them in like Fallout 2, right?
Yeah.
And then we don't see them again, and there's like no mention of them until a DLC for Fallout 4. So is there like
comes out of nowhere?
Yeah, I know, right? They're just kind of like there, and you're like, oh, okay.
And if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Like for new people, new like players to the series, like there's kind of like this weird group in Nuka World, but to like people who are like, when you know, you're like, holy smokes.
Yeah, it's like deep cut lore.
Yeah, deep cut is exactly it.
So let's walk back in history a little bit.
History.
What sort, like, this is the you know, like the traveling music.
That's right.
What
screen goes all wavy.
Right. What point got you sort of like into the Fallout community? Like were you like, Fallout 2, Fallout 3? Because I've had a lot of people say that maybe not a lot, but a lot more, a decent chunk of the community kind of came in Fallout 2, and then with Fallout 3 there was kind of like a renaissance because it was, the 3D
Right.
and everything. But everybody comes into this franchise in a different way and for different reasons. So what was, your whole journey into the wasteland, as it were?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm kind of late coming to the series. It was probably like in 2016 or so. So I'm a local to the Southern California, Las Vegas area.
Mhm.
And someone told me that there was like a video game that took place in the area. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I'm down with that. I had no experience with Fallout at all, but picked it up and played it, and I played Fallout New Vegas and was just blown away because I was like, holy shit, I've been to these places. Like these are the places I drive through all the time. Like especially like the stuff kind of out in the outskirts. And that blew my mind. So I was like, you know what I want to do? I want to find all of the places in the game in real life. And so I started driving around, taking pictures, and then going home and looking it up in the game and like, comparing, contrasting. And I did that for like a whole year, made a website of it. And then I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I dressed up like the characters and then like took like on location like cosplay pictures?
Mhm.
And so that like launched into a whole nother project of like, I'm going to take all like do a cosplay of each character and like take a picture like on location. So I started doing that for a while, and then that launched into like, well, I need to find out more information. Like, what are the whole list of the locations? And I was like, I'll look at the wiki, right? And so I looked at the wiki, and I was like, but some of this stuff is wrong. Like, that's not really where it is in real life. Like, it's over here. Like, I know this because I live here. And I started editing the wiki, and then that started a whole nother project. And push come to shove, here we are now.
What was the what were some of the more like, because you said you like would dress up as characters from the game and take pictures in those various locations. What were some of the characters that you dressed up as?
Oh my gosh, I've done so many
Ranger
now.
number 453.
Yeah, random NCR Ranger 215. Yeah. Some of the cool ones I did like Arcade Gannon at the old Mormon fort,
Nice.
and like tried to make his like scowl. I was pretty proud of that. My first ever was I did Benny, like gender bend Benny outside of the Good Spring Cemetery, and then kind of went on from there. I got a friend of mine to sponsor me to let me into Nellis and did like a boomer cosplay there. Yeah, I think did an NCR engineer at the Hoover Dam. Craig Boone in Baker by that big old thermometer.
Mhm.
I go on and on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I liked to do some characters that were kind of like obscure, like the weird like with like the Wins, like the people who are like planning to rob the casino. Pauline Wins, she has this like huge hat on, and I was like, dude, I gotta find like a huge like sun hat like that and do that cosplay. That was kind of fun to try to figure it out.
Put it in there for like the deep cut people, like who's gonna recognize this
Right.
character specifically from this location.
Right? Who the hell is this character?
So
And some of them didn't have locations, but I kind of just winged it.
you just gotta dress up as them because that's what you do. It's fun because
It's super fun.
it's fun. Yeah. So what, like, did you have like a history in doing cosplay stuff before that, or were you just like, I really love this game, I think it'd be dope to just start dressing up as characters from the game in the real world locations?
Right. Yeah, I didn't have a history in that. My hobby before that was quilting.
Ah.
So I knew how to sew. But I had never made costumes or done anything along those lines. So it was kind of like learning a new skill and like just peering like really trying to get like all the little details right and more importantly like kind of making it myself. like not buying like, like costumes online, or like just kind of making all the props myself, and trying to do that as close as I could to, kind of what they look like in game without like buying too much stuff. That was kind of a challenge to me. I was like, I'm gonna make this look like the character and look all dirty, and I'm in the perfect place for it. So
What was the what because you're from that region of the United States, what was like for New Vegas specifically, what was the location that was like the most wrong, right? Like that, I feel like Bethesda's really good at like locational
yeah.
scouting, so like a lot of the stuff that they do like pretty spot on. But what was the one where you were just like this isn't it, this is like off by like location, or like they just maybe not, because again they're very good at locational scouting, but like the one where it's just like this is just not an accurate representation of what this location actually is, to the extent that you take out the whole exploded by a nuclear bomb bit.
Right, yeah. I mean, you gotta make concessions for that, of course.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't really say that I mean, you're right. They did an incredible job scouting it beforehand and really making it look like one to one with the real world. It's what kind of impressed me to begin with. The only difference that I noticed, and this is saying a lot because it's a huge game, it's a huge swath of land, is that the El Rey Motel in the real world is in Searchlight, but in the game it's right outside of Camp McCarran.
Hmm.
That's the only big difference that I can. I mean, it even looks the same, but just in a different spot.
What did they like absolutely nail to flip onto the other side of the coin there? What was like the perfect thing? And I guess I got to correct myself there. Bethesda probably didn't do the most of the locational scouting. It was Obsidian who made the game on behalf of Bethesda, so I guess they did
Right.
the locational scouting. But what was like the location that they like absolutely nailed? Like you could walk
Yeah.
through that location
Always.
and like this is a 1-to-1. Like I could do this in real life.
Yeah, you can tell. The project director Josh Sawyer just released a bunch of pictures of himself doing the scouting trip on his motorcycle,
Nice.
and which I thought was super cool. So you could tell like that a lot of love and care went into nailing these locations, and I can definitely say that the one that comes to mind is, so first of all, like some of the details that are underappreciated, I think, just because you have to have like a super niche knowledge of the real world location to even know that it's a reference. And so I think I had one of those like Leonardo DiCaprio sit up and point moments when I was at the Nipton Hotel, and outside of the Nipton Hotel, in our world, it has like this really intricate rock garden.
Mhm.
And then in game, you can tell that like a game designer, a level designer, made that same rock garden in front of the Nipton Hotel in game. Like it just like made me like freak out. I was like, oh my god, there's no way, this is crazy. And like Nipton, like they just nailed the whole thing. Like the signs are the same, and like the buildings are like laid out differently, but like those little details, like there's a pickaxe and a shovel on the town hall and on the general store, and like that same exact sign is in game, and like they have the same flags and they have the same sign, and it's just crazy. Like they replace like a turtle with a scorpion, but like you can just tell it's crazy. But that rock garden always sticks out to me as something that like was just above and beyond, because I was like, there's no way, and I like look back and forth and back and forth, and you just have to like see it in real life to be able to, and then like pay attention in game to be like, wait, this is the same, like they did this intentionally. I think that's rad.
Yeah, that's really interesting because like I'm it's admittedly it's been a while since I played New Vegas, but like I'm thinking back on my memory because especially Nipton, like Nipton is probably one of the most iconic locations in the entire franchise just because of the way it unfolds. You're just
Right, yeah.
walking through the desert, minding your own business. All of a sudden, there's this dude talking about winning the lottery. he runs off, and then you walk into the town, and it's just like absolute carnage, and you're all like,
Yeah.
what the
What?
fuck is happening? And then this dude in the wolf hat walks up, and like, we're not gonna kill you. And I'm like, cool, thanks.
Cool, thanks. I can just imagine, like, from a role-playing perspective, like, the courier is just like, what is happening to me? Like, what is
Exactly.
going on? This is so bizarre. I bet they're just walking through like, okay, thank you, goodbye.
Right. And then like to the point that you made with that little rock garden thing, I think that that's one of the things that sometimes gets missed when you're focusing a lot on the story, which is, natural. That's
Right,
when you're
yeah.
playing a narrative video game, you kind of want to focus on what's going on in the story.
Sure.
But then like with Fallout, because both Obsidian and Bethesda are so good at creating little details and stuff like that, especially with like the locations that they build specifically, you sort of
Right.
miss those smaller details for you miss the forest or you miss the trees for the forest, I guess, in this circumstance. You're focusing more on the big picture rather than the little picture. And to that rock garden, I think as you pointed out, unless you're like familiar with that location and have that eye for what's actually there in real life, one, you don't notice it because
You wouldn't know, yeah.
Yeah, you're too focused on everything else that's going on around you. And then two, if you don't have that pre-existing real world knowledge, you miss those little things.
Right, yeah. It inspired me though to try to figure out like if there were any other, details like that and shine light on it, because I think that attention to detail is really really impressive, and I want to point it out and say like, hey, like, I see this is really cool that you did this, like, and I just, every time I think about it, I think they had such like a small like time frame, and they were still able to like nail these things so well. I'm like, that's just incredibly impressive to me.
Right. It did definitely help that they had, most of the assets they didn't need to make. They probably, I don't know how much, but they had a lot of work that was already done for them. But still, to be able to take those pieces and add on with the custom stuff, and then just make a world that feels so like vibrant and alive and crawling with little details is just like that's phenomenal. It definitely points out, or it's definitely a strong case for why New Vegas specifically is such a beloved game in the entire franchise. But more so, it speaks to just Fallout as a whole is just so good in representing those smaller details. You see it in like Fallout. You see it in pretty much every Fallout game. And I think the most plentiful would be like Fallout 4 and Fallout 76, where 16 times the detail. But like the comparison is just like so spot on that if you're familiar, like if you're from those areas, you notice those little things a lot more
Right away.
Yeah, like you did. And it all kind of sounds like this was sort of almost like you had all of the tools and all of the past experience to start to sort of get into what you're doing now, which is running a alternative Fallout Wiki page. Now, there's obviously like Wiki pages specifically. There's a whole bunch of them. There's the official ones. There's the fandom ones. There's the fandom ones.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of different wikis, that's for sure.
Yeah. But with like, especially in like the history of Fallout specifically, there was, for like the official side, there was technically two at one point, which were run by the same. No, sorry. They were like basically the same thing, but like they had gone through mitosis. So there was like two of them.
Yep. Yeah. Gone through mitosis, that's a good way of putting it.
Right, yeah. Because like I did a whole video on this forever ago. And it was just really interesting getting in there and sort of understanding the history and everything.
Sure.
But at the same time, as you had said before, there were like bits and pieces of detail that were not accurate or were maybe just off, or some bits of information that were just maybe not flat out lies, but didn't seem like they had done a full breadth of research.
Sure.
So you touched on it briefly early on in our conversation with like going to the page, doing edits and stuff like that. What was sort of the catalyst, the thing that led you into creating your own or like a completely different Fallout Wikipedia, the independent Fallout Wiki?
Independent.
Yeah.
we're pretty interested in that independent piece. It kind of sets us apart. We a group of us decided to split off in 2022. We preferred kind of like when you edit a wiki, you're volunteering your time and effort, and it shouldn't be a profit thing. Like nobody should be making money off of it. It's like a volunteer, thing that you do because you love the community. And there was no wiki available that wasn't like a corporate wiki, that wasn't like, had tons of ads and sponsorships, and I just felt that there should be an option that's ad free, that's run by the community, that's owned by the community, that isn't like a corporate entity. Because I felt like editing and putting all your time and effort into, like kind of like a money making, like a business, honestly, like, I don't know, I just didn't really vibe with that. So I think there's definitely a value to having several different types of wikis. Over the years, they've definitely branched off and kind of cover different things and cover different things in different ways. And it's always good to have, more than one source and more than one place to get your information from and to peruse. So, but we just decided to go our own way and do our own thing, and it's been super fun so far.
And yeah, that's because like I back on the like split, it was like I think it was originally the Vault, and then it became and sort of like split off into the Nukapedia. And in that process, I think a big, maybe not big reason for that, but part of that was because I'm trying to remember what it was. It was like they had some like big money backing from like a specific
it had something to do with money. It was before my time, but I remember like reading about it, and I remember the old timers like telling me about it. And
and it was interesting because like it was the same thing that was happening to a lot of wikis. Like I forget what they used to be called, but now they're called the like quote unquote parent company is Fandom. It used to be something else before, and then they either got that was it. It was Wikia.
Basically, I think and then so there was Gamepedia, and then there was Wikia.
Right,
Gamepedia. And then Wikia turned into Fandom, and then Fandom bought Gamepedia. So then both Fallout wikis were kind of under the same banner. Right. So then they kind of got like smooshed back together.
Yeah, the Vault kind of fell off at a certain point, and then it just became Nukapedia as like the big thing. Like you can still go to the Vault, like it's still up there.
Yeah, it's still up there.
Yeah.
So like it's just archived.
Yeah. And
but that was before my time. I'm sadly I'm not an old timer, but I certainly sit around and be like, tell us more about the history.
Like we want to know. Wide-eyed children listening to Grandpa.
Wide-eyed children. Well, back in my day,
right? Like back when I was a young strapping lad, there were only 2 Fallout games. And then they ruined it with Fallout Tactics.
Shakes fist.
Right, damn you!
I think that it was like a point of contention. Like a lot of people were upset with the decision to split off, and I know that there was a lot of sort of fallout, no pun intended. Kind of like blaming me for that and sort of like splitting the community, and I I kind of felt bad about that.
Blaming you?
Yeah, like blaming like maybe me, just like the group of us that like, why are you splitting off? Like this is gonna, make things more difficult. Like why can't, we just stay here? There was actually this was also before my time, but there was a conversation that the community had to split off years ago, and it didn't go forward. They had like a vote, and But I remember thinking like, man, that would have been cool. Like before I split off myself, I was like, man, that would have been cool. Like to like have your own host and kind of be your own boss, and you don't have like a corporate entity sort of above you that like makes the decisions for your website and kind of spoon feeds you analytics and stuff. Like it'd be cool to like have control of it.
Right.
And then now, like I was right, it is really cool to have control of it.
As somebody who can speak from personal experience here,
From personal experience,
it's awesome.
yeah, it's pretty awesome. Like being able to customize however we want, make it look however we want. Like it's just like a lot more freedom to do what we want to do and to take community feedback and be able to make that happen. And yeah, it's just cooler kind of being your own boss.
So what was like the I get, because it's unique, I think, because the previous comparison was like the Vault versus the Fallout Wiki, or Nukapedia rather, but they were sort of like the same thing, like they had the same parent company,
Right.
so it was sort of like the illusion of choice in a funny kind of
Right.
way.
Right.
But it was interesting because in my experience anyway, and I went over this in greater detail in a previous, again, that video I made a long time ago,
Sure.
talking about, funnily enough, the whole, what was it? The whole quantum Nuka-Cola power armor thing that you find in
Oh, sure.
yeah, that thing.
Nuka
You
World, yeah.
remember that whole controversy?
Yeah.
They were like, oh, it breaks canon or something like
Oh
that.
my God, yeah.
And then they sort of extrapolated on it a little bit. But one of the key bits was that I think there was just information that was missing from the Nukapedia, or information that was maybe not placed incorrectly, but wasn't
Right.
as detailed. But then you went on to the Vault, and even though it was still a little bit more like not 100% clear, there was more information there where you could then piece together like, oh, this is this is the
Right.
explanation. Like I think one of the bits of information that wasn't on Nukapedia that was on the Vault was that in what was it? In Fallout Shelter, during one of the missions, I think, if you're wearing X01 power armor, somebody else. Oh no, I think it was actually in the description of the X01 power armor. It said that power armor was used by the Secret Service, which is what we see in Fallout 2, because the Secret Service that's protecting President Richard is wearing. Oh wait, no, they were wearing.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I'd have to go back and look at my notes, because I remember meticulously writing all this out, and then like, here's my case, and it probably only made sense to like 3 people.
Hey, that's okay. That's
Right.
that's what's most important.
But I think the big thing is that sort of confidence of information, in a sense.
Right.
Not intentionally disinformation, but ensuring that the information that you're putting out there is sourced, backed, and verifiable.
Right. That's important.
Yeah.
And that's like our biggest thing, is that like when you look at a page and it doesn't look like quote unquote complete, like you have to remember that just because there's a lot of information on a page doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct. Like you have to be like an informed reader and say like, this whole paragraph doesn't have a single source, right? Like just because something is very concise and to the point, as long as it's referenced appropriately, like that's the information you want. You don't want like a lot of fluff and embellishment and guesses and headcanon. Like that's not the purpose of a wiki. And that's like a big problem, is like spreading that misinformation. Oh, I saw it on a wiki. Like we have a responsibility, because inherently wikis are just like, kind of an authority like on the matter. People look to wikis for their information, and it's very important that the information that we present is correct. And so like I could see like, oh, this webpage has a ton of information, but I mean, does it? Like you really have to look at it and make sure that like that's from the game, and that's not just like a rando person decided to like go on a long, it could be this, it could be that, maybe it's this, perhaps it's this. Like you gotta go back to brass tacks and make sure that's really what it says in the games.
And I
And now
think
series.
yeah, yes, series definitely. The franchise, the
The franchise, that's
brand,
right. The brand, right.
the intellectual property. I almost said international property. I'm like, what does that
That's
mean?
right.
Funnily
Well, it's
enough,
important now. We had to change a lot of the stuff on the wiki when the show came out because a lot of our templates and stuff, it all says appears in this game, appears in this game, appearances in this games, like, and so now we have to kind of expand it. Like, it's not just games anymore.
yeah,
And so,
it's
like, that was something we kind of learned on the back foot was like, oh, like, we're still kind of finding things like, in a table, it'll say like appears in games. I'm like, oh, no, we got to just put appears or appears in
right.
series, like series appearances or whatever.
When you were originally with the Nukapedia, because it sounds like at one point maybe you weren't. Were you like a proper like quote unquote staff member, or were you more like in some sort of like assistant role? Because you said that you helped with editing some of the pages and stuff, but like what was the like extent that you eventually got to at the Nukapedia before you switched over and did your own independent thing?
Yeah, so I was a member of the staff. That's where I got my start. When I started editing, that was the only. I'm not sure. I think the vault was locked. I don't think it was available to edit when I started.
Mhm.
But I started editing the Fallout Wiki and the New California Mod Wiki at the same time. Um, for the same thing, like here's all these locations, like, and so yeah, that's where I started and was a staff member there for a number of years.
And the New California stuff was on like a separate like fan wiki.
Yeah, it's a separate
Gotcha.
one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you had more there. So
good.
at what point? Because you talked a lot about the like properly sourcing information and stuff. Making sure that everything had citations and or maybe not citations, but sources. There
No,
were
yeah,
links. It wasn't
totally.
just like as you said, paragraphs that don't have any proper
Right.
linkage or anything. Was there a lot of that happening at the Nukapedia? Because it's interesting to look at like the history of it, because as far as the vault was concerned, that sounded very much along the same lines as what you're doing with the independent wiki, where it's like we're gathering all the information, we want to make sure everything is sourced and everything, it's all proper, it's all good. But then money becomes involved, and
Yeah,
the
that's
like
always the problem.
the people above you and stuff like that. What sort of like change in a sense, because it sounds like the stuff that you're doing, making sure everything's sized or sorted and cited and accurate and stuff like that, it sounded like that was the original intention of
Right.
really any Wikipedia site or wiki site. But it sounds like something changed at some point where that wasn't happening as much. Maybe what was the story there that led to you exiting stage left, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, I won't impugn any other, wiki or their editors, but I think that uh certain, like you have to look at what your priorities are. Are you trying to, present facts, or are you trying to, make something that's like, dramatic and interesting to read?
Mhm.
And there were like disagreements on, there's information that wasn't necessarily true or wasn't necessarily sourced correctly, or was true and wasn't sourced correctly. And, removing that was like a big point of contention. Like the decision to, you could put like a citation needed template on it that alerts people that like a citation is needed, and like, but if something is untrue, like that citation will never be found. It'll never be added. And in the interim, what's the decision? Do we leave it on the wiki, for some like magical citation to come along, or do we remove it? It's like, it's kind of an argument whether like, well, it might be true, we should look for the information. Okay. But what if it's not true? Then it's presented as fact on the wiki forever, without that citation.
Mhm.
So I think that was kind of like the back and forth, and like I could see, the value of not wanting to remove, important information from a wiki. Certainly, I'm supportive of that. But at the same time, like if something the the onus should be on the person who adds the information to add the citation at the time that it's added. And so, as opposed to like having people years later kind of stumble across it and be like, hey, that doesn't really sound right, or hey, where does this come from?
Yeah, getting
Because
like
that's like the
waiting for
biggest thing.
community feedback.
Right. But meanwhile, it's on the wiki, and like as I said, it's kind of like a inherent voice of authority, just wikis in general. So like the worry is that somebody's going to read that and then take it to their YouTube channel and say it, and I certainly didn't want to be responsible for misinformation and people, because it'd be totally unintentional too. And that made me feel really bad. It's like somebody got something from the wiki that was not true and kind of ran with it, and then people would either correct them or and they would feel bad, and like you lose that community confidence. And so I was like a really big proponent for like just making sure that everything we say is objective and everything we say is sourced, and it may make for more dry reading, but I think it's important, like our responsibility as a wiki to present things exactly how they are in the game without our interpretations or our embellishments.
And so like that's sort of the biggest difference that you're trying to do with the independent wiki, making sure that everything is like thoroughly fact checked and researched and sourced and like properly cited and everything
Right.
before putting it up.
So what we did, well, the way that worked is we made basically a copy of the wiki. It's called a wiki fork.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything is licensed under Creative Commons. So you could take that information and put it onto a different site. And so at that moment, like we forked and went different directions. So we spent 9 months as a private wiki, just basically scrubbing the place and like going through like the big, the power armor articles and the nuclear war articles and like literally the top level stuff, and working our way down before we went public, December 2022, and then have spent now going on 3 years, or 2 years, like doing the same thing, like kind of getting into the nitty gritty and checking things and like that has been the goal. So we started at the same place, with really the goal just being like trying to find sort of those instances where we can shore up sources and we can, add new things and definitely make it, a different site altogether. Yeah, so I think that side of it, like the actual game and series information, that was our biggest goal, was just making sure that all that stuff was and it's certainly a work in progress, we're not done, but making it very clear to readers on the site or the pages that were not complete, or just commenting out, which means like hiding it from public view but allowing it to be seen like when you go to edit a page, and like commenting that out until it can be fixed.
One of the, because you mentioned before that you were a private Wikipedia when you first started out, which I can't remember exactly when, but I remember seeing, I think I did a search for something, and one of the things that came up was your page, but it was in that private thing. So I just remember like having to like sign in with an email and stuff, and I thought like that's kind of weird. I've never had a Wikipedia page that does that.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember again. I can't remember because you said you went private public in 2020. You said 2021, right?
We forked in April of 2022, and then opened to the public. It was kind of like on Great War Day, October 23rd, we opened it we called it early access, which was what you're talking about, where you had to kind of like sign in. And then a couple months later, on New Year's Eve 2022, we opened to the public.
Gotcha. Okay, so that must have been around the time, because I still feel like I got in like super early somehow.
Oh yeah,
which doesn't happen very often for me.
Early adopter.
Yeah, I just kind of stumbled into the website and I'm all like, I'm here now,
hey,
I guess.
I'm there.
I don't know what's happening. I'm scared.
I'm scared.
But it was really interesting, one, because you had to do the whole sign-in thing, but it was also really interesting because it felt a lot like you said, you forked the website, so it felt a lot like the the original Nukapedia page, but it had a lot more stuff. Like it wasn't full, like as you said, you were still working on a lot of it, but it didn't. It felt like there was just a lot of extra stuff. So I remember at one point, you know, I mentioned it before, finding a page on agriculture, like the different farms that are seen in the
Right.
in the website, or in the series rather. And then, you know, the
Yeah.
the representation page. And there was like a couple of other ones I can't remember. I think one of them was like about water or something.
Yeah.
But just like all these extra pages about these more so like,
Kind of like not often talked about parts of the series, kind of like
yeah.
background stuff and detailed. No, that I'm glad that you bring that up because like that's a big like love of ours is like making pages for stuff that you might not think like would need a page, right? But
Yeah.
then starting to like, you know, for example, it's kind of funny, but the other day we were making pages for body parts,
Mhm.
right? So like all the times a liver was mentioned in the Fallout series, which is a lot of times, by the
Interesting.
way. Like, and all the times a spleen was mentioned, and like it was crazy. Like it was really fun to like do those deep dives and then like get like all the community involved. Like someone would come in, hey, I found this reference, or hey, this guy talks about it. Like let's look into that, and like just those extra stuff. Like there are like the main pages of Fallout you're going to talk about, you know, your power armor and your ghouls and your guns, but like there's just so much crammed into the series, like little tiny things, like yeah, how do people live in the world, what food do they grow, where do they get their water, like, you know, how many farms are there, how many cabins are there, like you just go on these deep dives, and like that's something that I think are like really makes our wiki shine, is like the attention to like the not oft talked about topics.
I just
And
thought it was.
we
Sorry, go
get
ahead.
our inspiration from the independent Doctor Who wiki. So the TARDIS wiki like goes above and beyond when it comes to like covering every single thing, down to like covering, you know, like every letter of the alphabet.
Huh.
Like but like it's really it inspired me a lot because I was like, I want to do that for Fallout. Like I want to, you know, have overviews of like here are every single time like a colon is mentioned. I don't know, that's kind of cool. It's not something you'd necessarily expect, but like we sure had fun writing it.
I more so just thought it was interesting, especially in those early days, how when I went to the LGBTQ representation page, it literally just took me to the Steam page for Fallout New Vegas. What was that? No,
Right,
because it's
right.
such a gay game.
What is going on here? Is this
It's,
intentional?
oh God,
Explain.
it trans my genders.
Holy shit.
So like it to that point, like, yeah, it was really interesting to see all those individual tiny maybe not tiny, but pages on those smaller, more obscure things that, you know, you
Right,
don't or you like you don't usually see in in like other Wikipedia pages.
right,
um
right.
I like it'd be like going to like, you know, the Wikipedia page for Assassin's Creed, right? And trying to find a page specifically on the agriculture, or like the various
Right.
industrial technologies that show up across the series. And as a series that spans a lot of, you know, the like 11th, like I was going to say
Yeah.
11th century, but then like, oh, one of the games is set in like ancient Egypt, so it's like that's not 11th century. But like you see a whole lot of like rural like farming areas, and it's like there's no page that's specifically dedicated, as far as I know anyway, on all of the like different farms across the series, but there is on Fallout, or on the
Right.
Fallout independent wiki page. And like it's really interesting how you can like, because in especially with like lore specifically, you think like, oh, I'm getting like real deep into this, and then there's that like
Right.
that extra layer of deepness to where like, oh, the Abernathy farm is very different from you know, the sharecroppers farm in New Vegas, or
Right, yeah.
like
Just
the
like we pay attention to like the details of it and like explain how it works, and like that's I think that's really fun to do, like as from an editing perspective. And it's good to know that like that's, you know, appreciated and that and helpful, and you think that's cool, like that's good feedback to have.
what was the like What was the most interesting page that you guys created for the wiki page that's like lore or like, you know, world specific?
One that I know that everyone worked really hard on was so we did LGBTQ, and then we did physical disability. So like documenting every single person who had a physical disability in Fallout. I know like they spent a ton of time looking into it, like whether you have one eye or Proctor Ingram has no legs, or like, you know, like people mention a lot of different disabilities. I think that was a lot. That was like a big project to kind of, you know, loop the community in and say like, oh, I remember like this guy only has one eye, or this guy's eye fell out, and like, you know, just have like all those references, because like it's something you, the series is just so vast, and you kind of like you were saying earlier, like, you know, you're in a narrative game and you're paying attention to what's going on, but there's just so much like around you. And
How
so if you kind of like hone in on one thing, like think of how many people like, you know, wear an eye patch, you
yeah,
know, like that sort of stuff.
I was actually about to ask like how big is that page? Because like you mentioned the Proctor, because not I keep thinking Proctor Quinlan, but I'm like that's not the right person.
No.
Gosh, what was her name? You just said it. The
Ingram.
Ingram. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
You mentioned Proctor Ingram, who doesn't have any legs, but then it's like how deep does that go? How many characters are there like that? And like, what's the cutoff? Because, you know, like Quinlan has glasses. Does that count as a
Yeah.
disability? Like, what's like? How do you go about determining those like finer like those finer lines there that separate the atypical from the typical?
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good question. So it's generally just a community conversation. You know, we kind of decide like at what point, you know, are we going to consider, you know, this a physical disability versus like, you know, is someone blinded disability? Is someone, you know, have a hearing aided disability? Like it was a conversation, and but it's flexible at the same time. You know, there's no like hard line in the sand. If someone comes along and you know wants to add something to a page, and you know, like if it makes sense, it makes sense. Like that, like it's not like no, this is absolutely not allowed. Like, you know, you make a good case for it. Like yeah, sure, add them. That's fine. Like the purpose of the page is to like, you know, share this information and like, you know, include as much as possible, but also you're right, there has to be like a certain line, like this person stubbed their toe, does that count? Well, maybe not so much,
But it hurt a lot.
but it hurt a lot.
What like to that point as well. How do I phrase it? Well, like there's the thought and then it's gone.
No, it's all good.
So like to the other part of that question, like how big is that page
It's pretty big.
specifically? Yeah. What
Yeah,
what
it's
all
a
we
pretty
got?
big page. So it lists characters by game, and then has each one has a source, and then at the bottom it lists like in table form like all the characters, what their disability is, where they're located, and what game they're from.
Does it have
So
does it have low IQ courier on there?
that was a conversation that we
was
had to kind of expand that.
For context too, that was the stupid joke I couldn't remember a second ago.
Oh, nice! It came back. See,
Yeah, there it is. I'm real glad we got
that
on tape now.
Yep,
That was worth it.
noted. Roll it back.
So like that's because like that is really interesting because you know you think of people like Ingram, oh gosh, you also said somebody who only has one eye. What was it again?
Porter Gage has one eye. Is like a big one.
That's right. Yeah, Gage. Yeah, you mention people like that, and you always like you see them in the instance, but then you don't really like think about them, especially
right.
Especially disabled characters like that. And it's really interesting when you see characters like that in video games, in any video games, but especially in games that have a post-apocalyptic setting, because you would especially think that people like that who are less, I don't want to say less capable, but have
I mean, shit goes down in the wasteland.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And if you only got one eye, like that's gonna that makes it harder to see, and then like you could catch a bullet.
Yeah,
but there's Gage.
There he is. Yeah,
he made
knows
it.
What's up? He made it. He's built different.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
um, yeah, go ahead.
So those are like some examples of some fun that we've had with, someone brings up a topic, hey, we don't have a page about this. Oh, we totally should. And then, going down that rabbit hole of like, let's make this and add to this, and then everyone gets involved, and it really is it's kind of makes like a lot of the time, editing is like it's a lot of technical stuff and website building. It gets kind of boring. But when you get back into the actual series and the content of the series, like it becomes fun again, and it's a way to kind of rejuvenate your like motivation to like keep going and like keep editing. Is like, oh, like you really rack your brain, and then you think about stuff kind of like when you're playing, and you're like, wow, like Hugo Stolz was born blind, like brand new, like last update is 76. Okay, I can add this to the disability page.
What was one of the page suggestions that it seemed interesting but didn't really have a whole lot of like weight behind it,
I let people cook. Like if they have an idea, there's a part of the wiki that's they're called sandboxes
Mhm.
that you can basically write whatever you want, within reason,
Mm.
and you kind of test stuff out. So if you have like an idea of I think somebody wanted to cover like each year of each vehicle, like having their own page.
Mm.
And I said, like, well, like, I'm not going to flat out say no to somebody. If they want to write something and like, we'll make it work, Like, we can take your ideas and we can, shore it up and get it published. Just like, let's see a rough draft first. Kind of if it's like a, idea. And we do the same things. Like, if I have an idea for, like right now I'm writing a page about neurodynes.
Mhm.
That's why I brought up hubology earlier, because it's been in my head. But like we have to purge the neurodynes from your system to get closer to the great hub and like the Starfather, and like neurodynes are mentioned like a ton of times over the series, but like had no page. And so like I was like, I'm gonna write a page, but I'm writing it in my sandbox. So I'm collecting all the references and kind of formatting it and making it like spick and span before I like will publish it on the main site.
That makes sense, and that also kind of segues because I wanted to ask about the like rest of the page. Like you said that there's like a separate part of the website that's for like sandboxing, but then there's other parts of the website as well. Like it's not just the wiki page. You also involve a lot more community stuff into it, like not just the Fallout series, but the Fallout fandom as well. What's the whole shtick with that? What all have you incorporated that we don't typically see on other like official Wikipedia pages?
Right. So this is something I'm really passionate about, is that back in the day, like there wasn't I always really wanted to write pages about mods. And I always really wanted to write pages about modding, but it wasn't allowed. And so when we split off, we started the mod space, which is like a comprehensive database of Fallout mods, Fallout mod authors, and Fallout mod voice actors. It's like an incredible part of the site. And brand new to like kind of something that really sets us apart is the mod space, and then we expanded to the community space, which is for like we got all sorts of stuff. We have like the speed runners are on there, and artists and Discord groups and content creators and podcasts and machinima.
Podcast. This one.
That's right.
Machinimas especially because like I feel like that was like a big thing a couple years ago, like when Shoddycast was like at like peaking, and you had like others like Asynchrony. It's kind of made a comeback. I can't remember. There's this one on TikTok that a buddy of mine showed me, and it's really funny. But like you don't see those as much anymore, and it's good to have a place like you can sort of display like these are the creators that are still making that kind of content, because Machinima specifically is a really time consuming thing, because like it's skits.
I learned all about it too. Right, like when you're adding stuff to the wiki and you're talking to content creators, like you ask a ton of questions, right? Because you want to fill out this page. And like I learned all about machinima. That's something I knew nothing about, and I was like, wow, that's really complicated.
It is like probably one of the most complicated mediums for which to make like a film or like a TV show or something is stop motion animation, and that's because you're actually fiddling with real
Yeah.
props and accessories and stuff to like move them. And that's how stop animation works. It's you take a picture, it's just a whole bunch of small changes to physical objects that are captured, and then like all that's just squished together. That's basically like the closest thing you can think of as far as to like how machinima works, but you don't have the benefit of being able to actually physically touch the things that you're messing with and you're moving about. You have to take that next step to learning how to do that on a digital level. So like, posing characters in a specific way, getting them, like positioning them in a scene. And then you have to worry about like the lighting and the weather.
And you're kind of at the mercy of like the engine too, like the physics and then you have to start all over if it doesn't go like exactly how you wanted to. It just looked like I was impressed.
One of the I think hardest things that I've seen has been making the character's mouth move.
Yeah, right.
So
that's so crazy.
One of the big things. It was kind of funny the way they did it. This was years ago. There was a machinima series. I think it was just called Raiders. It was ran by a guy named Asynchrony, and it was fucking still to this day one of the funniest series I've ever seen. But because they were doing it in Fallout, and you need to do like really specific things, like really technical things to actually make a character's mouth move in accordance with the words that they're saying. The way that they solved for that, instead of having to do all of that extra technical work, is they just said, oh, there's a plague going around. That's why everybody's wearing masks that cover their mouths, right?
That's pretty smart.
And it wasn't all just like, the surgeon's mask. They were like, oh, this guy's wearing like a helmet, or this guy's wearing like a bandana, or this guy's wearing like that Raider burlap sack thing. But like almost every single human character, and then I think even the super mutant character that they had, like you never saw anybody's mouth, because like that's just it's easier to write some sort of story reason than to go through all that technical extraness, which is why when you actually see somebody who was able to do that,
it's that much more impressive.
Yeah, it's mind blowing.
Yeah. No, it's super good.
But back to the wiki and everything.
Yeah, so like adding like the community space is really cool, because like especially like we just started adding like artists, like Fallout artists, and like our social media manager is a godsend, and she will reach out to artists and be like, hey, do you mind if we like make a wiki page for you? And like their response is like, oh, hell yeah, that's awesome, and then like put all their links and showcase their work, and that's a really fulfilling part of it, is just being able to like branch out beyond just the content of the series, but also like make it holistically like a comprehensive Fallout wiki. The vision is to include all parts of the fandom, all parts of like whether it's a voice actor from Fallout 2, or it's a speedrunner who like knocked it out of the park with Yes Man Any Percent, like like all of those parts are part of Fallout, and I think it's really important to to document that.
And it's because it's interesting, because even as has been talked about in this episode, there has always sort of been maybe not alternative wikis, but like more fandom focused wikis that kind of focus on things like that. So for example, if I'm remembering correctly, Fallout New California, I think you said it, Fallout New California has its own standalone Wikipedia page specifically dedicated for that mod.
Right.
But you've incorporated it into the same location that you find information from the game itself, and it's
Right, yeah.
also there as maybe like the centerpiece, but it also includes pages about the individual content creators, different mods, mod authors, artists, writers, voice actors, stuff like that. To
Right.
the
And we can Yeah, go ahead.
well, mostly it's like to the extent, what sort of like it with mods specifically, it's always been sort of like an intrinsic thing with Fallout, especially since like Fallout 3 and probably even the earlier Fallouts, to be able to mod the games. But it's also sort of separate from what I think a lot of people come to an official Wikipedia page anyway, for, which is that, accurate, cited, sourced, lore connected information. But then you have all this extra stuff here. To what extent or what onus is there to include that stuff, rather than just focus on the like actual biblically accurate lore stuff, as it pertains to the game? Because it sounds, in a sense, like it's a lot of extra work to a reason, but it feels like it's more work than a lot of other pages are willing to incorporate.
Yeah, I think it's a labor of love because like I've just always wanted to see like mods get that recognition and I think as far as a community goes, I think it early on it really helped us sort of spread the word that we exist, was like going around to different mod communities and saying like, "Hey, let us cover you." Like let us, make a page for you and now that we're kind of established, I think it's like a really good way. Like now it feels like a real resource because you can go and you can, look up like a mod author and you can see like kind of like their Fallout portfolio, like the mods that they've worked on, the mods that other mods have credited them on, resources and tools that they've made. And like they like modders will, edit their own page or they'll tell us, kind of what they want and I just think it's cool. Like if you're looking for a voice actor for a mod, like you can go to casting call or you can like look to see who has already done Fallout work, who's already voiced, characters and mods before and, reach out to them, have their socials and stuff. I just think it feels like a real resource now and to kind of like amplify here's all these like super talented people and here's all the stuff that they've worked on and it's just like it's exactly what I pictured. It's exactly what I wanted. Was like here's all their mods and like right now we're working with Concord Stories and like Merry Modding Days.
Mhm.
To release like one they release like one mod or like feature per day and like we unveil them on the wiki as well, like one by one. They're like behind a question mark before, and like being able to like, incorporate that and work with them and bring, and then we stream it, like here's the Merry Modding Day mod of the day and stream it and play it and give props to the author who made it. Like it's kind of comes full circle. But you're right. There's like different modding wikis, all over the place, and I felt like it would be cool to like have them centralized. And a big part of that, like just recently, so Fallout London, like allowed us to like cover, like it was our first full wiki, like our first like full content wiki for a mod.
Mhm.
Like was it like a sub wiki was for Fallout London, and like it was the first time we've really gone deep in covering like we would for Fallout 4, like every weapon, every character, every location, like in its own space. And that was like our inaugural one. We've made like pages for like larger mods before. We covered America Rising 2 and we covered Attack of the Lobotomites, New California, The Frontier, Tale of Two Wastelands, that sort of stuff. But like this is the first time we did like a full like effort, and like I felt super honored to be able to do that. Like I felt pretty special that they like allowed the wiki to, see the ESM before it came out and, start working on it like behind closed doors and then like releasing on release day. I thought that was really cool. I think it sets a cool precedent for mods in the future.
I think it does, especially since as I said, the way you're going to, or as I mentioned before, as I told you, no,
As I told, dictated.
Like this is what I have to say. But it's you're taking, especially with Fallout, because I feel like it's kind of the case with just Bethesda games in general, or at least the creation games rather. It's the, games like Skyrim, Fallout, Elder Scrolls, excuse me. Sorry, yeah. I'm going to have somebody saying something mean to that. Like, it's not Skyrim, it's Elder Scrolls.
Give him a pass.
Right. Creation games, as I refer to them, the Elder Scrolls series, the Fallout franchise, and now Starfield. Those games specifically, and maybe future games in Bethesda's roster, but those games specifically, as opposed to other games like Indiana Jones or Deathloop, I think it was. I always forget the name of that game, but I know it was made by Bethesda. Those games specifically, because they're built on the similar, like the same engine. They have a much stronger connection to the modding community, and ergo a stronger connection to the fandom. So on the one hand, an official Wikipedia specifically only focusing on the lore accurate stuff as it appears in games, in print media, in the TV show, are like specifically like you go to that page for that. But with as I said, games like the creation games, because they're so deeply tied to the modding community, and we can look at Starfield, for example, as like, because I don't think there's anybody who would actually question like, oh, like they're not that tied to the modding community. One of the really interesting things that I noted, and this happened recently, like I think within the last month, maybe month and a half, with Starfield, they for a while they've had their create the creation club thing opened up for them, and they have individual modders who aren't working for them but are like professional modders, like King Gath, Eleonora, stuff like that. King Gath specifically, his whole team actually put out a mod. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it adds a whole bunch of different like new space suits with like jetpacks and stuff like that.
Oh, nice.
And it's really interesting because that was the first mod that I remember seeing that was from an individual creator that, I guess in this specific instance, was launched through an official platform from Bethesda, but was also achievement enabled.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and I saw that and I'm all like, does that mean this is canon now?
Yeah, does that join the club?
Right, but the interesting thing is it's not I can't imagine that it is actually canon. If it is, that'd be huge. But like that wasn't the first. There's a couple other at this point, but it's interesting because in a sense it's the recognition of the fandom in a more official way. It's a very small and subtle officiation, but it's there. And I feel like with the stuff that you guys are doing at the Independent Wiki, where you're also bringing in the modding community and then the the creator community, the speedrunning community, stuff like that, because the games are so intrinsically just sort of, again, intertwined with the modding or with the community and the fandom as a whole, it feels a lot more natural than a lot of other games, because the fandom is a part of any game franchise, but very few is it actually like directly a part of the franchise. Like the
it
biggest
does
game
feel very natural.
Yeah, and like with like Baldur's Gate is a good example. Baldur's Gate 3 specifically has gotten a lot of additional modding stuff, but then you don't really see to the level as like with Bethesda creation games, like you mentioned Fallout London. That was like such a huge accomplishment for like the entire franchise. Like it's not official Bethesda canon or anything, but like it doesn't need to be.
It doesn't
right?
need to be like enjoyable and to be, a part of the Fallout, like the main like overall arcing Fallout. It counts, and that's kind of what like on the wiki, like I didn't want to exclude anything. Like if it's related to Fallout, I want to cover it.
Exactly. And we've also talked a lot about New California, which, if memory
It's
serves,
awesome.
yeah, one, it's awesome. But if memory serves, it was the first really like, big official like its
Yeah.
own kind of game mod that was ever made for the Fallout franchise. And it was really interesting because I remember at one point they actually sort of hinted at the existence of the frontier in their mods timeline, in their like canon.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got to that point a couple years ago when I was originally playing, I'm like, oh, is this trying to set up like this whole like alternate universe
Yeah.
where it's like Fallout games, but it's fandom and stuff, which they
No,
didn't.
it's cool.
But it was like a fun little nod. Um,
Yeah.
but that sort of brings me to my next question. And you mentioned before that you talk with individual modders and stuff. They tell you like what they want on their page and stuff. To what extent does that, like what's the full extent? Because obviously, I can't imagine you just they would say like, oh, we want this, and you're like, okay, and then you just add that without any sort of like, like due diligence
Right.
in like
No, it has to be like
resourcing.
kind of independently verified.
Right. Yeah.
When
And
someone says like this is an inspiration for my mod, like we don't need a source for that because that's the person telling us that was the inspiration for their mod. But we do verify like if this person was credited here, this person worked on this, like there's ways to verify that.
right. And because it's still a fandom community thing, obviously there's going to be specific things that the community is like, oh, we don't really like this, or like this was, subpar or whatever. While not the majority opinion, I have seen some people be a little bit critical of specific parts of Fallout London, myself being one of them. I still think it's a great mod, but there's some things that are more so flavor related for my
Sure.
specific tastes. But when
If
you
we
look at
have like a question, if somebody like adds something, we always go back to their team
yeah,
and say like, hey, is this correct? Hey, can you verify this? Like we always get it from like like their word of mouth, because otherwise there's going to be a lot of stuff and we don't like necessarily say like, here, everyone put your opinion of these mods on these mod pages. Like we want to keep it like factual and
right, yeah, you stick to the facts, not the rumor mill or the opinion columns.
no.
Yeah.
There's plenty of other places for people to like vent that information and like talk about that information. Like a wiki page for it is just not like the medium for that.
Right. But when it comes to a mod, for example, like the Frontier, what like, if we can focus on the Frontier specifically here, what was the thought process around inclusion for the Frontier in the mod or in the independent wiki pages?
Yes, we cover Frontier just the same as any other. There's actually a group of people who work on those pages. Not anything different than anything else. I think that if, like I said, if people have like a certain opinions about the mod, or they can take those comments elsewhere. But as far as like if there's something, if you mean like if there's something like in a mod that is potentially like not safe for work, then we would choose to cover it in a way that is safe for work. So it's just about being tactful in how you describe something, and not necessarily like excluding information, but like at the same time, there are ways to say things that are appropriate. And as much as Fallout is like generally like an adult themed game series,
They
not
say
necessarily all
swear
of them.
words.
They say
Like,
swear words.
disclaimer,
People die,
they will
but
say the
like
word butt cheek at least once.
they will. But there are ways to say things in a tactful way, and that's kind of where we lean as far as like if there are content in mods that are maybe sort of in that realm.
Mm-hmm. And because it's interesting specifically with the Frontier because of the reception that it had, but to your point again, it is it's an adult themed game. There are adult themes. That's just how we talk about the topics. The quality at which the message is delivered is always a debatable topic, but I think it's interesting with the Frontier specifically because they're working on sort of like a new version of the game, like a 1.0 version where a lot of the stuff that at least from what has been talked about publicly, they're planning on redoing a lot of stuff from the original mod to like add new content, deplatform or not deplatform, but remove specific content, add new content.
Sure.
And that's part of the modding process, but more so often you see that happen before a mod launches rather than after, except for when they add new content, because that's just how the modding works.
Right.
When you have situations like that where new stuff is added, old stuff is removed, what is the process you go about with that? Is there an entirely new page? Do you go back and add a whole bunch of redactions, citations, additional notes, commentary, stuff like that to the original page? How does the process of that specifically go about unfolding?
Yeah, so we have a lot of precedents from Fallout 76. So a lot of stuff is removed from 76, re-added. We call that stuff legacy. So when something is removed from the game, no longer we'll put a banner at the top and then write like a little note at the bottom. So the same is the case. So Fallout London is also they put a lot of patches, hot fixes, and are now looking at DLC. And so the same will happen there. So if something is removed from the mod, we'll keep the page. We'll just put like a little banner at the top and then say, this was removed as of this date. And then make, new pages for the new content. And then so people can look through like all the stuff that was removed, all the stuff that was added. We don't delete anything.
Mm-hmm.
So like when Frontier, rolls out their new stuff, like we'll just cover it like normal. And then anything that was removed, we'll go and, add a little banner and say this was removed as of, the 1.0 version and put it in a different category so it doesn't show up on like the overview pages and kind of like unused content or cut content in like the base games. Same sort of idea.
Yeah, like it's maybe not unlisted, like you can still find it on the page,
yeah, you
but
can still
like
find it.
Yeah.
If there's enough stuff, we'll make a whole new page that says like Fallout Frontier legacy items.
Right. Yeah, and I think more so that is because it's one of those things where you have to I think more so that's the really interesting thing that I find with the modding page, because you see the mods roll out, but then mods will update, mods will change, they'll add new content. Like Sim Settlements 2 was a really good example. Like I think people thought that Sim Settlements 2 was just going to be a one thing, and then you get to the end and it's like, oh, a cliffhanger. Oh, wait, a cliffhanger. Wow, yeah. Hold on. So there's like always new stuff that gets added, and even with the original, new stuff got added later after the next chapter dropped, and then the third chapter dropped. And with the modding pages, I think that's really interesting, because then since you guys are cataloging all that stuff, you can kind of see the progression from like where a mod originally started to where it eventually got to. I think it'd be a lot of additional work to add all the I don't think it would be super.
But that's like an organic thing to see, as we just update the stuff. Like that's a good point, is that you can kind of see, what was removed and what was changed over time, and change logs. Same with like a Fallout 76 patch notes. Like we kind of covered the same stuff with mod hot fixes and but yeah, you're right. I never thought about it that way, but that's true. You can kind of see the progression of it.
Yeah, and I think that more so adds to the level of assuredness in what is being added to the platform is accurate, is up to date, is as to the extent as much as it can be perfect, quote unquote.
Right. Till it gets to that point where they're happy with it, and yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that's we had those precedents for the game for 76 and like even Fallout New Vegas removed stuff like in patches.
Mhm.
So we had it as far back as that, like certain things were removed, and we just kind of made a note of it.
One of the and this is more so contextual. I sometimes ramble a little bit, but this has a this has a relation to the Wikipedia pages, and you'll probably know immediately what I'm getting at here. When Assassin's Creed Shadows dropped their trailer, one of the main characters that they had or presented in that game, because for this game specifically, there's two main characters. There is a Japanese woman named I'm blanking so hard. I think it's Now. I'll have to. I can't. And then the other character is the real life historical figure Yasuke, who is an African American man who was brought to Japan on it was like Spanish slave ship or something, and he became a vassal to the daimyo of Japan at that time, Oda Nobunaga. And I think before the game dropped, there wasn't a whole lot of conversation on whether or not Yasuke was actually historically a samurai, like he held the samurai rank or title or military position. But there was since that got kicked up, there was a whole lot of, and I think still to this day continues to be a lot of conversation on whether or not that was historically accurate. There were people who went in and actively sought to change the Wikipedia pages.
Yeah.
There was a whole there were pages of Wikipedia edits where one person would change it to this, another person would change it to that, and it was just like this war between different people.
That's what it's called, edit warring.
Yeah, and to that extent, it obviously it's a lot easier to document Wikipedia pages when they're related to a video game than real life history. But to that extent, because you do allow editing suggestions to be made on pages and stuff, to the extent as far as it relates to editing those finer bits of information, because obviously, you guys have a main staff, you do all the writing and stuff, but there's always going to be like the fans who are like, actually it's this, or actually it's that, based off
which we encourage, everyone can, put in their 2 cents.
Of course. Yeah. But then like those individual bits of personally sourced information from casual fans and stuff are kind of one of the things that led to the misinterpretation around the Nuka-Cola Quantum Exo-1 power armor from Nuka World. So I guess more so my question is, what is the onus for the Wikipedia writing staff to take in community sourced information and apply it to the finished product to ensure that it is as accurate as possible? Because as you said, you have a writing team, a research team, stuff like that. But I can't remember who, but somebody in the video game industry said that, you can do all the QA testing you want on a video game, and then you could do like a year's worth. And then once you release it, somebody's going to find a bug or a glitch or some sort of exploit, because you can't account for everything when you're a finite team compared to the thousands, maybe millions of people who are going to play your game or read your article and, try to fact check it and add all this extra stuff. So where is the onus on to what responsibility Wikipedia page editors, like the official staff, have towards that extra, community driven stream of knowledge?
Right. So whenever there's like a big YouTuber that comes out with like a lore video, there's like an influx of people who, come to edit the wiki. And if that, YouTuber's like information is not necessarily like sourced, it's a challenge. So we have a tool called the moderation queue, which if you're a brand new user, your edits don't get published to the site immediately. It goes into like a queue that we have a team that reviews it. So if you add, information, it's ultimately a judgment call. But if someone adds something that needs a citation, we will reach out to that user and say like, hey, where'd you find this information? Do you basically like what's your source, like the meme? Like a personal opinion is not a source. Like I saw it on YouTube is not a source. Like if you have like a developer, saying something, like link us their socials, or link us where they said it, or timestamp us a video of them talking about it. Like we are more than happy to assist with like the formatting of stuff. If people aren't necessarily sure like how to add something or how to format it, like that's totally fine. But before something hits the site, it has to have some merit. It has to be independently verified. So yeah, because if we get a flood of people who are coming in saying, well, this YouTuber said that this was true, and well, like let's look into it. Maybe it's true. Like, but we have to have, like I was talking about earlier, like we have to have the information and the source added at the time it's published, not a couple years down the road when that user is gone and we can't find the source, and it's just like a headache kind of down the line. So it's just a requirement that if you come in and you add something, that it's got a source attached to it. Now some things don't necessarily need a source, like this book can be found in this location. I mean, we can see with our human eyes that book can be found at that location. If we wanted to get into the nitty-gritty, we could data mine that information too.
Mm-hmm.
But like as far as like this was inspired by, or like kind of like those weasel words, like this was this is like a real world thing, which by the way, we have a whole section of the wiki dedicated to real world stuff. So if somebody wants to come in and say like this gun is in Fallout 3, it's actually a real world, Chinese pistol, awesome. Let's add it here. And that's like a whole different thing. So we can kind of like redirect folks, if they want to talk about real world stuff, if they want it, like as long as the stuff that hits the site in our like main game pages, sourced, accurate, A-okay.
Nice. Because
the last thing we want is for us, intentionally, unintentionally, obviously not intended, to be the source of misinformation that seeps into the fandom and then like causes a lot of issues.
Right, because especially with the lore, it's like lore isn't something, lore videos specifically aren't something that's unique to Fallout or anything, but there's a lot of them. And I feel like it's one of those things where it's interesting because you could always go to like a content creator who covers lore. Synonymous is a good one. Any of the Shoddy Cast ones. And it's like you could get a pretty damn near accurate representation of the lore and the story.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
They did a good job.
Yeah. They're very, very well sourced. But then at the same time, ironically enough, it's like using Wikipedia as your source. Like
right.
You can't use Wikipedia as the source, but you can use Wikipedia as a tool to find the source.
To find the source, and that's the point.
And to that extent, I feel like that's what the lore videos are. Like it's not intellectually accurate to be all like, oh, like this is wrong because it said so in this lore video. It's like, okay, well, like what was the lore video source there? Like what specific bit of, locational information or data mined information or this, that, or the other thing, what are they citing from? And when you have a Wikipedia page like that set up, I mean, obviously any wiki page like that, you are able to take that next step and that clarification. But then on the community side, that helps to push back, or maybe not push back, but prevent sort of that lazy research where you're just like citing a video or going to an article or not an article, excuse me, a content creator, for example, who's like, oh, I'm covering this information in a lore accurate way. And it's like, yeah, you are. But when somebody comes forward and like, I got this source from this video, it's like, well, yeah, but where did they get that? Like,
But where
you
did
need,
they get it?
yeah.
And
And
if the buck stops with us, like I want to make sure that anything that we have on there is good, so that we're not contributing to misinformation. Because, like I said earlier, like it's not like anybody is intentionally. We assume good faith. No one's intentionally trying to mislead their viewers. But like if they get something that's not sourced, incorrect, headcanon from the wiki, and they present it as fact, like how many people are now going to be presenting that same fact as fact? You know what I mean? Like. And like, so if we can stop it from the beginning by like making sure that everything is, trustworthy and comprehensive and referenced, then that's like like priority one.
what's some of the things that you're hoping to do with the independent wiki page going forward? Like, what are some of the like big, goals you have on the horizon that you're still building to reach?
Yeah, so we just started an overview section where we're really trying to like consolidate information that's across the series, like characters that appear across the series, like kind of themes that appear across the series. That's like a new project that we just started. A big part of our 2025 goals include a lot of community aspects. We are as a community working with Fallout for Hope to for the 2024 campaign to raise money for St. Jude Children's Hospital, and that's like a big thing that we just got into. We're really hype about. We are also we also had our first meetup, like as our like community like editor meetup at the Fallout New Vegas Day, which is pretty rad. We got to go to like real world locations and like dick around, have a good time. I think our focus for 2025, we kind of had to sit down and we feel pretty established now. We're confident in like we're making gains in SEO and our site is stable and it's really big, and we're pretty confident and feel established. And so now I think we're just going to start to reach out farther into the community and see what else is out there as far as like covering different groups. Like there are a lot of corners of the Fallout community, and I want to know like what else. Like we kind of fell ass backwards into meeting the speedrunners, but like I want to cover data miners, and I want to cover people who make tools, and I want to like start going through the nitty gritty of like even more details about the little tiny idiosyncrasies of Fallout. And I think now is time to like we got through the fork, we got through establishing ourselves as a site, and now I think it's like now we can have a good time. Now we can kind of relax and start to like engage more with the community and have fun and stream and make some money for some good causes and just really have fun doing what we do. And so I'm enthusiastic about the community aspect, and I'm also really looking forward to seeing kind of what new mods come out next. Kind of looking to see what's coming out in 2025 and cover those and continue working on little stuff like the Fallout TV show was a big thing that we had a blast watching together and covering all like all that stuff, and looking forward to the next season, which I hear is filming close to my house, so I'm excited about that.
There you go. You can sneak on set.
That's right. See me like I'll photobomb. Here I am. That's my claim to fame.
Right.
Edit her out.
It's not gonna be the wiki page. It's gonna be photobombing season 2.
That's right. But yeah, so our community, we call ourselves Schmaltech, which is like if you've played Fallout 3 Point Lookout, it's kind of a deep cut to the bobbleheads you find when you're hallucinating on Punga. Schmaltech bubbleheads. So we call ourselves Schmaltech, and that's kind of like where we're based. Everything is Schmalt related instead of Vault related. It's a very funny joke, trust me. But yeah, I think just kind of diving into community stuff and and covering whatever comes out. There's a lot of also like board games, crossovers is another one. Like Magic the Gathering just came out with like Fallout cards, which we're really like excited to cover. There's like Minecraft and Fortnite and like a lot of like crazy like crossovers that have been kind of fun to cover as well. So as long as people are making Fallout stuff, we'll be here to cover it. That's kind of how I see it.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Kate Aces, founder of the Independent Fallout Wiki. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow to be notified of future uploads, and consider subscribing to our Patreon, where your monthly contribution will go towards improving the quality of transmission, keeping episodes ad-free, as well as helping to decrease the time between uploads. Until next time, dear listener, I thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all out there in the wasteland.